The Daredevils of Asobo have released an update for sim update number 3 beta on Friday the 13th. In this video, we're going to look at what they fixed in this update, but also the known issues. But first, let's roll the intro. After some initial publishing issues where not everybody received the update, everybody should now be able to receive the update, right? That was reported on Friday the 13th. And let's say there's some things in this update which you should be aware of. First of all, there are still performance issues, especially around large airports and when restarting flights, mainly due to the additional telemetry which has been enabled. And if you're playing on the Xbox Series X or S, you will likely be mostly affected or severe affected. On the PC and stream, it's, let's say, hard to say because they didn't describe it here. But besides that, there is some additional things which they enabled. So if we scroll down, we can see the release notes. And here they say that they have a stability tracker, which should have no noticeable impact on the performance. So that's good. If when you notice too much VRAM being used, please complete the following steps. So if you see the VRAM issues, then make sure that you're performing these steps, right? Make a screenshot with DFPS enabled and then send a report by using the options General Experimental Create Report. I will record a special video for that one to explain that a little bit more. So now let's look what has been fixed. First of all, stability and performance. They fixed the controls menu to cache data and prevent unnecessary file loads when navigating, only loading input profiles when entering the menu tab, switching aircraft, or creating duplicate or renaming a profile. This specifically for the profile section, right? They kind of remodified it to make it easier, but I already saw some issues with this, with weird names popping up in the profiles. So hopefully it will be resolved soonish. Then they fixed several old and rare crashes in the stall warning simulation system, and they fixed a crash occurring in the model behavior parser when cancelling a request, rapidly clicking tiles in the aircraft selector. So some interesting fixes, although this one I'd say is maybe a very specific one. Then if we go to the general bug fixes, there also are a lot of fixes, but also some new things have been added. First of all, they fixed the font rendering issue as Square during mission onboarding, and they also fixed the sim rate with time, as well as they added some new functionality, as already mentioned. They added positions for time and offsets, and also added a new offset to get the flight time without sim rate modifications. So it looks like that they made some modifications to the sim rate, which you can use to, say, increase the speed in your sim. Of course, it's less realistic, but you can do it. And they also made some changes to the position for the time and the offsets. Besides that, they fixed some issues with adaptive deliveries, does not accept the Japanese language, and they fixed some time issues, which doesn't work with sim rate, right? Fixed time didn't work. Fixed the profile page, it was not appearing during the flight if opened with the keyboard or gamepad, and recently the opacity of the, or reduced the opacity of the glass dust layer. This was something which in some cases result in some weird, I would say, views, and they now fix it in this update. At least that's what the reasons say. If we scroll down, we can see more issues being fixed, right? Some issues where some options lines could have wrong visuals after being clicked, and also they fixed an issue when choosing a departure in free flight would not zoom on the world map. I haven't seen this one, to be honest, but it could be that you have been affected by this. Now for the VR cockpit, the camera position resetting when leaving poles, that's being fixed. As well as a fix if you look around using the mouse feature to allow the player to keep the aircraft inputs while moving the camera. Besides that, they allow the player to lock their input presets, also nice. And they changed the new plane flares of interior lights to be disabled by default, right? So previously this was enabled, now it's disabled by default. Last one, they fixed a potential crash when the HC attempts to look for appropriate star to assign for clearance. This, of course, is some new functionality which they have added in sim update number 3, and now it has been, I would say, fixed because there were some issues in very specific scenarios. Backwards compatibility bug fixes, the UV length not being computed correctly, where GIF geometry is reused, so it avoids blurry textures from models coming from 2020 packages. So that's nice if you are using those backward compatible packages, which are the 2020 packages. The aircraft, That's also where you see a lot of fixes. First of all, the sim object light positions not properly initialized when the level of detail containing the nodes to attach to it's not available yet. And they fixed the crash with the object follow graph AI, as well as a wait for pilot and co-pilot, which has been changed from, let's say, modified to create a mandatory procedural character. So these are all, let's say, things which you, let's say, are affected by, but in most cases, this is really developers which need to make sure that they're using this functionality. Scrolling down, we will see a lot of aircrafts which have received fixes. For example, the AT802 air tractor. They fixed the damping of the front wheels on float variations, and they fixed an issue causing some circuit breakers to not work properly, affect the windshield wipers and their associated lights. So very specific circuit breakers which result in some weird things with the wipers as well as the lights. For the Airbus, they fixed the cockpit emissive being too bright in LODs, right, the level of details. And the airship industry's Skyship 600 also received a fix. They made the water ballast functional. So that's a nice functionality. And I would say this is something which you could, of course, try. But maybe I will record a video about this later on. Although it's, I would say, minimum functionality which I added. If you go to the Boeing 737 MAX 8, they also fixed some things. For example, the flight path vectorization issue. Involving certain procedures with intercept lengths. They added the RT uplink in the CDU, so this is something new. As well as they fixed an issue where the airplane speed was not being anticipated correctly in the lateral flight path calculations. This is also something which is, I would say, could cause some serious issues. Then the Cessna 208B Grand Caravan, I would say, are really one of the older aircraft. Not, I would say, from, I would say, time perspective, but really, I would say, the time this aircraft has been in Flight Simulator, this is being one of the first ones which was added, right, even in 2020. So they increased the yaw damper gain to fix the Dutch rule with autopilot, so it's being fixed. And for the DG Aviation DG1000E, they fixed two things. The first thing is the landing gear binding. Key bindings of the DG1001 not working when they were using up-down keys instead of toggle. And there was an issue which caused the same aircraft TAUS cable to become unreleasable if it was already released by the TAU plane. I do think that I saw also these fixed in a previous build, so I'm really wondering if it was not 100% fixed, but it might be now 100% fixed. But again, they don't put percentages behind it. The Diamond DA62 also received an update. They fixed the thumbnails for all the variations. Then jumping to the aircraft core systems. First of all, the failure and the wear and tear. They fixed the damage resistance of helicopter tails and skids. I'd say resistance likely sounds like, okay, hey, it becomes less sensitive, but it's a little bit unclear. And the fuel system also received some updates. They fixed some inconsistencies of the fuel system debug window, which is for developers, and they fixed an issue that prevented gravity-based fuel transfers in some cases. This is something which you could be affected by if you're using these aircrafts. Then going to the class cockpits, because they also received a lot of updates. First of all, the G1000 NXI. They also fixed the flight path vectorization issue involving certain procedures with intercept lengths, and they reduced the PFD memory usage. This is really, I would say, a nice one. What you will likely see, and that's already seen on the other glass cockpit, is that the first issue, the first issue I should say, is resolved in all versions, right? Also for the G3000 and 5000, the GNS 430 and 530, as well as the Primus EPIC 2.0 integrated avionics system. Now, if we look specifically at what has been fixed for the G3000 and 5000, we see that there's an additional one where pressing the terrain settings button on the GTC's PFD map settings page would not correctly open the settings pop-up. That's been fixed. And for the Primus, there's also an additional fix where the airplane speed was not being anticipated correctly in the lateral flight path calculations. So this one is the same as for the Boeing 737 MAX 8. Now, if we go to the Pro line and UNS 1W, we see, let's say, both fixes, which were there for the Primus, are also now there for both the Pro line and the UNS. But in addition to that, the Pro line also received the update, which we saw for the Garmin G1000 NXI, where they reduced the PFD memory usage. If we go to the physics, we can also see some things. So they blocked reading of the empty interior tensor parameter in the weight and balance section of the model CFG, along with all the related fixes for MOI calculation and rotational dynamics. They moved it. So what they did is initially they tried to enable it, but they would say they figured out that it was simply not realistic to release this as part of sim update number 3. So that's why they now blocked it, and it will be moved to sim update number 4. Also, they updated the debug aircraft way tool to perform the same validation checks on MOI as during the aircraft was masked properly loading, and downgraded log level for MOI validation issues doing aircraft loading from errors to warnings. So this is again more for developers than for, I would say, people who are using these aircrafts. Then the electronic flight bag. A lot of fixes there. So let's go to them, right? The first fix is there, which resulted in some cases, the arrivals with en route transitions, the route string produced circular routing near the transition start. The next one also had to do with the arrival procedure, and the route string had an extra number at the end. And there was an issue where the aircraft cruise performance was not calculated properly when using the performance profile data. So a lot of fixes specifically for flight planning. Then in addition to that, they also fixed some issues with the map position not centered on the aircraft when starting a flight, right? You needed to press the center button, then it would focus on the aircraft. And there's an issue fixed where the auto routing picked procedures that were no longer or that were longer than the entire flight. I also had that, and that resulted in sometimes, I would say, really weird patterns for the flight path. Besides that, they add some other things, like the automatically computed cruise steps will no longer target cruise altitudes below the highest VNAV above descent constraints in the flight plan, because that sometimes happened, right, that you were assigned a really high altitude while it was bypassing the restricted areas for the VNAV. And there's also the route string will now omit DCT, which stands for direct between two custom waypoints. Change the cruise altitude warning to yellow. Warning is now hidden if the route is incomplete, and the automatically initially a cruise altitude selection will now prioritize respecting the airplane's maximum cruise altitude over respecting flight plan VNAV constraints. That's also nice because if you're being assigned an altitude which is much higher than the, I would say, recommended altitude for the airplane, things will go wrong. Besides that, they lock the waypoints are displayed with a padlock on the map. And the map will be centered on the current flight plan every time the original or the origin and arrival airports are selected. So this is really nice. So this is something which you now need to do manually, but using this update, you will now get this, I would say, being done automatically for you. In addition to that, they also added the speed and altitude restriction information to the route page. This is really, I would say, warm welcome because that was what I was missing, but now they added this information to the route page. Now we're going to the aircraft tag. First of all, they changed some model behaviors. So they added support for capacity and quantity in the Asobo water ballast parameters. This likely has to do with that helicopter or that aircraft which received the water ballast. This is likely one of those required parameters which needs to be available before they could introduce it. In addition to that, they added a underscore valve suffix to all the parameters previously present in the Asobo water ballast parameters, since they were only related to the valves. So also something which you need to be aware of. But again, this is more for developers, not for the normal simmers. Modular aircraft, they fixed the with exterior show interior hide first LOD, hiding the entire interior of the modular aircraft if interior was an empty model. This also likely has to do with developers which, I would say, had some specific configuration, and you were affected by this because then there was no cockpit, but now it's there. Then if we're going to the aircraft gameplay, we see a lot of fixes for the ATC. First of all, they fixed the bug where the response to an arrival clearance with the star could be mismatched, right, with the clearance given. And they adjusted the climb descent gradients for aircrafts not providing performance data for better descent estimations. They added the expected altitude to IFR clearance. That's really nice. And they improved the initial altitude clearance on departure using published top altitude, SID, or safe terrain values. Besides that, they fixed the bug where the request IFR clearance options were available without a fault IFR flight plan. Interesting one. And they stopped the traffic allows to AI aircraft clogging the frequency. This is something where you would likely be affected by because in some cases this resulted in that you were unable to answer to the ATC because there were so many things being called out that you were not able to answer. Also, I'm really wondering if this one, the expect altitude to IFR clearance, if that one really works well, because that's what you see a lot, right? When you're assigned a specific, for example, procedure, they start assigning you the altitudes far too late, and I would say the workaround is to request it yourself to descend or to, I would say, a lower altitude. But it would be nicer if they would assign the correct altitude to you, right? Then the passive aircrafts. They fix a lot of things, a lot with liveries, as you can see, also registration numbers for multiple ones. I'm not going to go to the full list because you can see it's over here. And the passive airlines generates constraints in contrails in sky. That's this, I do think, something new. At least it doesn't say it's fixed. So nice things. Then going to the career mode, some general bug fixes. They fix the refuel to full capacity not working in freelancer mode, as well as they fix the power side grain between some screens in my companies. The missions one, several mission fixes for the aerial construction, the rotorcraft. They fix the player character not able to move at the beginning of the mission, and they added a condition to prevent the pickup while landed. For the cargo transport hook, also for the rotorcraft. They added dialogues when damaging the cargo during deposit, and they fixed the flight path altitude for oil rig missions. Search and rescue, also for the rotorcraft, they fixed several visual issues on back and track during search and rescue hoist missions. So the rotorcraft still has some issues, and they now fixed it. Certifications, the commercial pilot license, they added a taxi to gate flow. So likely this will also now be monitored, because I would say that's what I do expect, although it's hard to say based on the description. Then going to the online services. Also 2 fixes and 1 improvement. You could argue if that's also fixed. But the first fix is a fix for an issue that caused higher than expected lightning intensity. Strikes are now less frequent and more in line with reality. And they fixed an issue where the clouds on the world map did not transition correctly after a data update. That's also being called out in one of the developer webcasts. And last one is they improved the thunderstorm prediction. So you'll likely be able to see more thunderstorms now more realistically. For streaming, they fixed the game freezing when attempting to stream sound packages due to the sound XML being in a folder which name did not start with sound. Also interesting. And for the airports, they fixed multiple things. First of all, wrong ICAO codes for the Kaituur International Airport. They fixed missing buildings and parking areas in LaGuardia Airport. They fixed the cabin service state not changed if passengers are forced while cabin service isn't in a boarding state with a default state. They added the EFB default state boarding for service state. And there's a bug specifically. They fixed the discontinuity in displacement caused by incorrect airport SDF. I'm not sure where it stands for, but they fixed something. Hangars also received some updates. They fixed the aircraft not being inside the hangar in mission briefing screen. For traffic purposes, they fixed some AI planes not disappearing when close to the player. I haven't seen this one, but pretty interesting. And for the MyLibrary, there's some new things. So they added the notifications to keep the user informed about the progress of the download of their package through MyLibrary, right? This is really if you want to use the download functionality. And they added a download option for the packages in MyLibrary. So this means with this message that the download package option will be available as part of Sim update number 3 based on this release notes, right? Because previously it wasn't called out, but now it has been called out. So I would say initially I received some feedback, hey, but this is not officially in the release notes, so maybe it's not introduced in Sim update number 3. Based on this, I do think, and I've got a really strong feeling that it will be part of Sim update number 3. Multiplayer. They modified the multiplayer character to always be on the ground, and they fixed deliveries are not applied in multiplayer mode. So a lot of cool things. Then going to the virtual reality. And I do think that there might be some overlap. I'm also not sure if this is correct, because what you see is they added interactions with the cockpit touchscreens, but they also added it here, but let's assume it's correct. So that's being fixed now on supported VR controllers with the following new actions. These are the actions. And they also fixed the missing icons for some VR controller inputs, and they fixed the toolbar that sometimes disappeared when leaving the VR mode. For the controls themselves, again, some VR fixes, these ones, but also here you can see them mapped by a default on VR controls and gamepads. Cursor mode is no longer needed for the ladder. And they moved the key binding primary, secondary toggle to the top of the action settings page. So simply a GUI change. Besides that, they added some new things. They added the cockpit free look off and the free look on to allow control of the surface while looking around. Both actions are now mapped to the default mouse preset instead of toggle cockpit view free look hold with on, triggering on press and off on release. And there's a description which they changed. The toggle cockpit view freelook hold has been changed to specify the services are uncontrolled or controllable while it is in on mode. So if a freelook is enabled, you can't control the aircraft. Then some specific peripheral issues. Well, not specific because it says various peripheral issues. They added the control over some menu scroll bars like the Marketplace, MyLibrary, career time selection when navigating on keyboard with open brackets, close brackets, page up and page down. Nice. And then we're coming to the activities where they fixed some trainings. First of all, they fixed the wrong engine settings after back on track in the beginning of the training, and they fixed a 0% score for releasing the tow cable in the glider aero tow mission. As last one, they fixed the wrong flight paths being displayed in the basic handling trainings in the EFB. And that's where we end this video because the rest is all dev mode. So you can see that a lot of work has been performed. It took a while before this, I would say, build was released. It's already the 5th build in, I would say, range of builds for sim update number 3 beta. The question, of course, is, okay, hey, will this be the final one? Well, I'm not so sure about this because if it was the latest build, then I wouldn't expect these kind of messages in the release notes. So again, here in this video, I hope you liked it. If you liked it, then make sure to hit the like button. And I'm always looking for your feedback on how to improve videos. But also I want to know how your experience is with sim update number 3 beta. Thanks for watching. See you back next time.